So I'm now honored to welcome and introduce you to the speakers today. So Carelle is the policy lead at Corporation Canada. Her responsibilities include examining trends in international development and humanitarian work, developing advocacy messages and strategies, and advancing dialogue with various national and international actors. Before joining Corporation Canada in November 2021, Carelle accumulated 20 years of experience working in climate change mitigation and adaptation in the United Nations, as well as environmental policy and humanitarian assistance with the US State Department in West and Central Africa. She holds a PhD in Geography and Environment from the University of Western Ontario and an MSc in Chemical Engineering from Université Laval in Quebec City. We're also very delighted to have Zeenia. She is a seasoned expert in gender equality and international development with over 14 years of experience in leading and delivering human rights and gender justice programs in various contexts. She also has a strong background in participatory and rights-based approaches to sustainable development, intersectional gender analysis, inclusive research, and policy advocacy. Throughout her career as a gender equality advocate and practitioner, Zeenia has contributed to international development programs focused on issues such as rights of women and girls, modern slavery, inclusive growth, climate action and women, peace and security with various international organizations across different regions. She currently holds the position of the Senior Advisor for Gender Equality and Inclusion Advisor at Plan International Canada. Her portfolio includes programs related to women's economic empowerment, promoting inclusive education, and also strengthening feminist movements. We're really fortunate to have them speaking here and participate in our Q&A session today. So now I'm gonna just pass it on to Madhuri to moderate the question and answer session.
Thank you, Sagarika, and thank you, everybody. I would love to pose the first question, which is for both of our speakers. And the question is, what is the Feminist International Assistance Policy? And a few different parts of this question. So why was it implemented and why there is a need to have FIAP? When it was implemented and where do we stand currently? And what are the ways moving forward? And Zeenia or Carelle, whoever would like to go first.
Thanks, Madhuri. I can go first and maybe tackle the first two parts of the question. So I'll start by providing a little bit of a summary intro to the policy. The Feminist International Assistance Policy, or the FIAP, as it's more popularly known in development circles, is Canada's commitment to taking on, as the name suggests, a feminist approach to addressing some of the most pressing, urgent development challenges around the world, including fighting hunger, improving health and nutrition for all, quality education for all, poverty reduction, and inclusive growth. And gender equality and the rights of women and girls are a central focus of this approach to international assistance. And what that essentially means is that Canada, through its international assistance, will prioritize investments, partnerships, and advocacy efforts that have the greatest potential to close gender gaps and to help achieve sustainable development goals. Now, although the FIAP was launched in 2017, I would say that Canada's commitment to advancing gender equality, the gender equality agenda precedes that. So there was the gender equality policy that in place that provided a framework to pursue a gender equality agenda in Canada. However, what was being witnessed, and this is to answer your question around why such a policy was needed, is that despite efforts in funding programs here and there were gaps that remained, and a more concerted long-term approach was needed to really strengthen the commitment to gender equality. There was also this growing realization and recognition globally that a more prosperous, peaceful, and secure world is very much linked to achieving gender equality and to promoting the rights of women and girls, and also to valuing their contribution. That said, even with this realization, if you look globally today, gender equality and the rights of women and girls are still a very underserved area when it comes to investments from funders and donors around the world. I think it's something like 4% in development assistance globally goes to initiatives focusing on gender equality. So there's a lot of gap that still needs to be filled there. Another reason for a strengthened commitment to gender equality in parallel to this is regressed progress on gender in wake of growing number of conflicts around the world, the climate crisis, as well as crises such as the COVID-19 pandemic, if we look at more events more recently. Therefore, an emphasis on development assistance that really works, that prioritizes the most vulnerable population and puts gender equality at the center of everything, where organizations take on a feminist lens to addressing development challenges is needed. And in doing so, the FIAP emphasizes gender equality as a standalone goal, as well as to be integrated throughout Canada's international assistance programming. The policy requires that no less than 95% of Canada's bilateral international development assistance initiatives target or integrate gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Just to say a little bit about what makes the policy feminist, it is the focus on intersectional, human rights-centered approach that takes into account the various intertwined and intersecting forms of discrimination. Such an approach prioritizes the needs and aspirations of individuals and groups who are most vulnerable and who continually face social marginalization. And it is of absolute paramount importance because eradicating poverty necessitates a comprehensive understanding of the diverse needs of different demographic groups. So this is really a central push of the FIAP, the policy. Having said that, a feminist approach requires more than focusing on women and girls, and it also requires a transformative shift in the ways of working and engaging. So a change in processes, systems, structures to allow for that is also needed. The FIAP, therefore, emphasizes a focus on localization. A shift from merely providing support to women's rights organizations through funding or capacity strengthening to ensuring that they are central to decision-making in designing programs, leading research, for example, participating equally in monitoring evaluation, acknowledging their expertise and experience, and really focusing on their lead on matters that impact them the most and the populations that they represent. So that's also a very key component that the policy emphasizes. To better amplify voices, women's voices around the world, the policy also commits to collaborating with those partners who will pilot, design, and champion new and innovative ways of working with local women's rights organizations, therefore, to advance women's rights, the rights of women and girls around the world. So in summary, why it came about is because more needed to be done in terms of funding. There was need for a focus on a transformative approach to bring about change that is sustainable. And also a shift was needed to ensure a more meaningful participation of those who are actually taking a lead on issues pertaining to women and girls at the grassroots level. So women's rights organizations in the context where Canada is providing international assistance was something that was really important to emphasize. Lastly, I would say that the FIAP is definitely demonstrative of Canada's commitment to gender equality, and other countries have also taken inspiration. However, there's definitely always room for improvement, and Canada can do better, but it's important to stay the course and, maybe push the dial a little bit. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Zeenia. That was so comprehensive. It was a fantastic answer. And 4% really is nothing for the amount of, for just the unique needs of women and girls across the world based on context. And as there's more conflict and the climate crisis, there's definitely a lot more investment that's required in this field. And Carelle, would you like to go over a little bit about where Canada stands currently with the FIAP and what are kind of the next steps and where we're headed?
Sure. Well, the FIAP is still a very strong policy signal. So that cannot be denied. It remains a unique characteristics of Canada's face on the international scene. Canada joined the ranks of other feminist countries. So this is a strong message to the world. At the same time, the current crisis and the concurrent crisis, some people say the poly crisis, that those interwoven crises that hit one after the other are putting the FIAP to a test, because the temptation has become over the past few years to become reactive to crisis rather than proactive. The ambition, the dream, the vision of the FIAP was to invest, to tackle those structural, and Zeenia said that, the ambition, the vision of the FIAP was to invest in the structural causes of poverty, of inequality, of gender equality, with the assumption that if we tackle gender inequality, we will be able to solve so many other issues. But with the current crisis and that temptation, I think not only Canada, but other countries, but let's talk about Canada, has been retracted in the reactive mode, in the firefighting mode, overlooking what was the big dream? What was the big dream? So you need to solve the current issues. So you try to extinguish too many fires, and then you forget the big picture. And I think now we are at a crossroad where we have the vision, and the vision is still very good, not perfect. There, over time we've some in the sectors that when I say this, I tend to say the sector. What I mean by the sector is the international cooperation sector. Some have highlighted areas of improvement in the FIAP, areas that have maybe not been taken into account as they could have been, but that's work in progress. It's fine. But I think the biggest challenge now is, can we go back to that fundamental, the driving vision of the FIAP, and stop? There will always be crisis, but investing in those long-term drivers of crisis as a better promise of bringing returns of investment. The other point, just very briefly, some of you might have seen last spring, the Auditor General of Canada released a report on international assistance, and they looked at not all aspect of the FIAP, but they wanted to focus on bilateral development assistance that was allocated between 2017 and 2022. So that's about $3 billion per year. What is interesting is that the report doesn't conclude that the FIAP is bad and it's something to be abandoned, but it says that Global Affairs Canada, so the government that has most of that funding to allocate under the FIAP, that Global Affairs Canada was not able to demonstrate the outcomes achieved under the FIAP. That is concerning. So it doesn't say, nowhere does it say the vision was bad, the policy is bad, but it says, we don't see, it's not clear, there's no evidence of your outcome. They didn't say you didn't achieve anything. They did say, well, you're not able to demonstrate how you achieved what you said you would. So this is where we stand, and maybe we can unpack that further during the conversation. But let me pause there for now.
Thank you so much, Carelle. You brought up some very interesting points, particularly with when you spoke about reactive versus proactive funding, because right now a lot of the funding that's going towards emergency sort of situations and relief, and also there's a shortage of something like midwives. There's midwives shortage in a lot of these emergency settings, like whether the funding is how the funding is actually separated, and whether they're thinking about it as funding towards emergency relief or whether they're thinking about it as funding towards gender equality. So there's a lot that needs to be broken down there too. And of course, just the results and how the results of these or the outcomes are being evaluated, because at the end of the day, how are we supposed to know whether a policy is working if we don't know what is actually coming out of it? So thank you for that. So the next question I have is for Zeenia. Since our focus for today is on the FIAP on this particular action area, which is gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, could you stress upon the need to focus on women and girls, particularly at this time when we're experiencing and witnessing overlapping protracted crises all over the world?
Thank you. Thanks, Madhuri. The need to focus on women and girls because of the reasons also that Carelle mentioned, and you've also touched upon them. I think it's an obvious one. I mean, I don't even know where to begin on that question. There's so much that really can be said. There's so much evidence around us that gaps still exist in achieving gender equality, and that press upon a focus on the need to have more funding towards gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, the initiatives that promote those. If you look around us, it's easy also to see that barriers pertaining to gender norms still persist around the world, making it very hard for women and girls in all their diversity to have equal access to opportunities for growth and development. And the gap in gender equality not only persists, but as Carelle's also mentioned, it is widening as women and girls are disproportionately impacted by crises around the world. So structural, systemic, cultural barriers still exist that are an impediment to gender equality, and crises like the COVID-19 pandemic or climate-driven crises or conflicts that occur around the world are amplifying these barriers, and resultantly, this is having a lopsided effect on impact on women and girls, exacerbating the situation for them on the ground. So we've actually witnessed regression in certain areas of gender equality if you look at the progress across the Sustainable Development Goals as well. So just to put some, bring some statistics into it as well, according to the World Economic Forum, at the current rate of progress, it will take us 136 years to close the gap on gender equality. And just to throw in some more facts to put this in perspective, according to a recent report by UN Women, if the current trends continue, and progress is not made in all areas, over 340 million women and girls may live in extreme poverty by the year 2030. And this is really presses upon the urgent need for support systems to lift them out of poverty, for social protection mechanisms that are focused on women and girls in so many different contexts. Violence against women and girls is another huge barrier. It is prevalent and frequent around the world. It is the most pervasive human rights violation, causing harm to women and girls every day. Again, a report by UN Women highlights that 245 million women and girls experience physical or sexual violence by intimate partners. And the worst is that violence against women and girls also worsens during crisis and conflict situations. And and this is data that is reported. We have so many unreported or underreported cases of violence against women and girls around the world, because in many contexts, it is seen as a domestic issue, despite there being laws against it. Harmful practices such as child marriages persist. 1 in 5 young women is married before the age of 18. If we look at education, an estimated 110 million girls may remain out of school by 2030. Again, this is stalled progress on education in several contexts that is leading to potentially leading to statistics like these. And on top of all of this, again, there is inadequate funding for gender equality initiatives. Just 4% of bilateral aid goes to gender equality and women's empowerment initiatives around the world. According to the report, an estimated additional investment of USD 360 billion per year is needed actually to achieve gender equality by 2030. So it's actually a huge gap. Another point that I'd like to sort of bring in here is something that's also very alarming. In parallel, we also have an anti-rights movement and agenda that is ongoing right now. We saw what happened in the case of Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade in neighboring US. There is more urgent need in face of this growing coordinated kind of attack on the rights and freedoms of women and girls. That is actually very well organized and very well funded. More funds have gone to these movements, than gender rights movements. So the gains that have been made in over the decades have actually regressed in some of these areas. If you look at reproductive rights, to gender-based violence, to LGBTQIA+ equality, women's place in politics, it's making it more and more difficult. So I would say with everything that is happening, with all its flaws still to address, learnings to take on board, I think Canada's leadership still in setting aside funds for flagship programs such as, and movements such as the Women's Voice and Leadership Program and the Equality Fund is again a recognition of the need to focus on gender equality. So overall, I think for all of these reasons, it's pretty obvious why this gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls needs to be a central focus of the international assistance policy for Canada.
Thank you so much, Zeenia. Yeah, it was a very general question. I think we all know why all of these things are important, but the point that you raised about the regression of some of these values is very important, and not just in the US, you saw it in Iran as well not long ago, and although people have stopped kind of talking about it, and I think that's the thing, it goes through the news cycle and then people often forget all the things that happen. So thank you. And Carelle, my next question is for you. So what is the role of civil society in implementing FIAP along with the government? And how are they an integral part of implementing the strategy?
So the government has funding allocation for international assistance, but civil servants do not run to countries to implement those programs. So they need to transfer the funds to multilateral organizations like the UN or other large organizations, multilateral development banks, or to their CSOs, civil society organization. So the role of civil society is key because the Canadian government does and must continue to rely on its civil society organization to implement programs to ensure that the vision that is laid out by the government at the central level is translated into initiative. I mean, it's pointless to talk about gender equality if you don't have actual programs on the ground where you have to do stuff. But yes, so civil society organizations are not just implementers. We're not just contractors that, okay, call, I need a well dug in Malawi, go and dig it. So this is just one aspect of that role. We are also challengers and advocates. What do I mean by that? we challenge the government. So we have a vision, nice policy, it's all, French and English, nice looking document. But do you, government, who adopted, yes, civil society was instrumental in having that policy adopted, but are we walking the talk? Or do we just have a banner of a feminist leader? How do we ensure that there is coherence in all phases? I said earlier that the FIAP changed the face of Canada on the global scene, but the FIAP is international assistance. There is action being done under trade, under defense. Is it the same face? So what we do, civil society organization, we challenge one aspect that we've been talking, one element we've been talking about for many years is the feminist foreign policy. So we have the Feminist International Assistance Policy. We all agree, very good, the FIAP. But the government has been talking for years about a feminist foreign policy, a more encompassing policy that would pretty much define the face, not just one aspect of the face, not just one corner, all the face, sideways, front, back, all of it. How Canada shows up on the global scene. And I was in a meeting this afternoon when someone from the government also referred to the feminist foreign policy. I haven't seen it. Zeenia, have you seen it? No, because it's nowhere to be found. It's been referred to many times, but it doesn't, there's no website where you can click and read that foreign policy. So we challenge the government on being coherent. So we want one Canada that talks the same language in defense, when it's about military operation, when it's about peace restoration, when it's about trade. So it's very good, and it's not to diminish in any way the strength, beauty of the FIAP. But unless we have policy coherence across everything that Canada does abroad, we would say one thing, and then you will read another report and like, is it the same country? How come we're doing this too? So policy coherence is definitely one area that CSO, civil society organizations, challenge the government. But we also advocate, because we need to leverage the strength that is in the FIAP. And one way we do that is every year, well, you've seen the federal budget. So Cooperation Canada and other, everybody advocates for something when it's budget season, but we want to see the ambition of the FIAP reflected in the international assistance envelope, that portion of the budget that goes to international assistance. But we also advocate for not just for money here, but also for money flowing to partners in countries of intervention. This is, I think Zeenia mentioned that, the localization agenda that we call the power shift agenda. The only way to reverse the inequalities is to ensure that people in the countries where we are working have the means to do. It cannot be just empty words. Yeah. Be strong, empower you. We want you empowered. But if people lack the resources to actually be empowered to do the things that make their lives easier, then it's all empty and void. So that was a long answer to your question. So in a nutshell, we advocate, we challenge, and what else? And we implement.
Thank you so much. It wasn't long at all. That was very comprehensive. And in my last role at UN Women, it was basically we were funding programs in developing contexts, but specifically in my department, over 75% of those funding was going specifically to grassroots NGOs and women's rights organizations, because they're the closest to the ground and they're able to make the most change. And it's better than going to a bigger INGO that's, there's a lot of different finer issues there. But yeah, civil society is definitely the most important when it comes to actually seeing change.
I wouldn't say that. I think there's a role for different sizes at different places. It depends on what is the problem you're trying to solve. But definitely, we are a very important element.
Thank you. Okay, so the next question is for both speakers. So please feel free to answer, whoever would like to go first. How have your respective organizations been working on implementing their priorities? And the FIAP in some ways, I guess.
Yeah, I can go first. I think plans work already aligns really well with FIAP and its priorities. We have very similar priorities. In fact, I would say plans work or plans focused on women and girls in particular predates the FIAP. So as an organization, Plan International has a very clear focus on gender equality and the rights of girls in particular. And it is integrated in all of the work that we do. Gender equality, social inclusion are cross-cutting thematic areas, cut across our thematic areas such as health, education, economic development, humanitarian response and protection, and achieving gender equality and promoting gender justice, realizing girls' rights and fostering an inclusive society are core objectives of our work as an organization dedicated to child rights and to the equality for girls. And this commitment is very much reflected in our global strategy, All Girls Standing Strong, and our global policy on gender equality and inclusion. And as part of the new strategic framework at Plan International Canada, we're committed to achieving 100% gender-aware programs by 2027, with a very high target for gender transformative programming. And what that means is that all of our programs and projects at a minimum will integrate gender equality and work towards improving the condition of women and girls, while most projects will also prioritize addressing the root causes of gender equality and improving women and girls' position in the society. So in that sense, I think we're really focused on a feminist gender transformative programming agenda when the FIAP also came along, and therefore a lot of our priorities aligned. But I would say the FIAP has really definitely helped in strengthening that commitment as well. It has helped us in encouraging and facilitating our partners also to be more aligned with the feminist agenda. Before, it used to be a struggle many a times to bring sometimes different partners on board with the gender equality agenda. But when a funding partner such as Global Affairs Canada mandates a gender equality focus, making the case with partners becomes much easier. With this shared understanding and commitment, we're able to deliver, I would say, higher quality gender transformative programs in collaboration with our partners. So, I would say it's pretty aligned with the FIAP priorities, the work that we do. So, thank you.
And if I can add oh, did you want me to go?
Yeah.
So so we are, unlike Plan, we don't implement programs. So Cooperation Canada is a coalition. We are a convener. We have members like Plan who implement programs in countries. As a coalition, our role is twofold. There's a role in Canada. There is a role, and I would say for the most part, our role is in Canada. But because we are in the international assistance sector, we also have a voice internationally. So what are we doing in Canada with regard to the FIAP? I mentioned earlier the federal budget. So the FIAP remains the anchor we use each time we prepare a submission. So the way the federal budget works, and maybe I shouldn't even explain that, organization or ask or invited to make submissions. And they explain, well, we would like the government to allocate $2 billion to flowers in whatever, and mushrooms. So we prepare our submission for the federal budget, and the FIAP remains an anchor, because this is the frame that, unless we are told otherwise, it's a frame that we continue to use. And we also use that same frame for our regular consultation with government officials, whether it's Global Affairs Canada or the Minister of Finance, but also with Parliament, members of Parliament. The other one example of that is the way we remind our interlocutor of the vision of the FIAP is very important, because we want to focus on things that people cannot disagree on. It's easy to be caught in some controversial parts where you'll see members of Parliament from different political wings disagree on things, but there are elements in the FIAP, and that's one beauty of it. There are elements that no one will argue against. So every year there is a week in February where we celebrate the international development. We call it the International Development Week. And this year we had a beautiful event where members of Parliament were invited to a reception, and it turned into a quite strong cross-partisan moment, because they discussed and they united, and it was impromptu. We had planned for one person to speak, and one liberal spoke, and then invited someone from the Conservative Party, and that person invited someone from the NDP. They just did it on their own because they were able to find common ground, those areas of the FIAP that no one will dispute. So this is one way we work as a coalition, and we don't do that alone. We have our members like Plan and others who will all work together to do that, but this is some of the things we do here at home. What are we doing internationally? Again, using the FIAP, because that's kind of the Canadian brand for international assistance. There are several platforms where we are vocal and bring the vision of the FIAP. One platform is the Development of Effectiveness. It is a multi-stakeholder initiative, bringing in the private sector, CSOs, governments, academia even, and think tanks to think about ways to make development assistance more effective. So this is one place we take the message of the FIAP. Another place is the civil society engagement on the margin of the G7. So every year, the 7 big economies, not the biggest though, not anymore, but 7 big economies gather, and they have their summit, but civil society organization organize themselves on the margin of the G7. And this is one place Cooperation Canada is also active, again, trying to bring the systemic approach that is embedded in the FIAP. Zeenia mentioned the power shift. We are very active in that space, again, to shift the focus on a global north with all the resource and all the money, not opposed, but servicing or helping a global south. This is an outdated picture, and we are challenging that picture. So we are taking the vision of the FIAP, domestically and internationally.
Thank you so much, Zeenia and Carelle, especially the last point that you brought up, which is the shift away from the global north to just decolonization. And I know that Plan really focuses on that in a lot of their programming as well. So yeah, I was very curious because I had a question about that later, so we can talk about that. And then this is really the last question. And so the final question is, what are the ways in which youth can contribute to the implementation of the FIAP? And
I have so many ideas for you.
go ahead. All ears.
Well, I want to say really the first, I would say the first place to start is with yourselves. That's the one thing you control, 100%. We've talked extensively about the vision and the words. There's a lofty ideal in the FIAP, but essentially, it's about people investing in a world that is different than the one we have now. It's a commitment to look at what are the reasons why we keep talking about inequality and poverty and crisis decade after decade. That comes for and we can talk about systems and geopolitics and all that, but there are people behind those systems. So those people are you and I. And one invitation I could extend to you is to reflect on what it means. What does it mean? What, you know, the vision, the ambition of the FIAP, what does it mean for me as I step into the professional world and my career? How do I fit me? How do you fit? How do you see yourself embarking on a professional journey? Do those values and principles, do they resonate for you? If not, sooner or later, you'll pick a side. So this is the one I would say probably the first area I would invite you to consider is, what does it mean for me? The values of the FIAP. The other thing, once you fixed yourselves, is the electoral process. So we'll have elections sometime soon, maybe. It is a time to engage. Whether you can vote or not, you can always talk to your MP. You can talk to them and challenge them on those questions. Okay, what is your stance on the FIAP? If they don't know, well, teach them. If they do know, ask them, ask them what is their sense, and irrespective of whether they're liberal or, you know, green, blue, or, you know, purple with stripes, ask them what is their stance on the vision. Because we said earlier that the FIAP was a great, a strong policy signal. It's also a flagship policy, but it's a flagship policy of the Liberal government. What happens when we have a new government? Is it going to remain Canada's brand? Or is it going to, hey, you know, there are all those questions you can ask your MP and force them to express themselves and take a position if they don't have one yet. Those of you who are maybe already working, and you can also, if you, well, depending where you work, and if you are in the sector of international assistance, well, ask your organization, is there anything more we can do to implement the vision of the FIAP? What is available out there that we can take to heart and run with? So yeah, just 2, 3, I don't know how many that was, but yeah, my 2 cents on this. Things you can do.
Thank you so much. Zeenia, would you like to go?
Sure, thanks, Madhuri. Those are really good, some really good points and suggestions from Carelle. I don't know how to follow from that, but some few similar things that I had in mind. I think first of all, I would take it a step further to say, become a champion of the feminist approach. You know, again, get involved in dialogues. As Carelle also said, ask the right questions. If you can, take up leadership roles where you're able to influence policy in the favor of a feminist agenda in particular. And if you're a part of a youth-led organization, or if you are a leader of an organization, a young leader of an organization, think of ways of working within your organization itself. You know, are the processes and policies feminist? Are they inclusive, accountable, transformative? Think about how you and your organization, again, can contribute to this agenda. Another thing I think is really key, And the FIAP also emphasizes, and again, it's a huge gap, is data. I think ask for data where it's missing, wherever you see the opportunity. Get involved in research if you can. Initiate research that can facilitate in bridging some of these gaps in data, because data really matters. It's what really drives policy responses, and there are huge gaps when we look at the kind of data and statistics we have. They're not intersectional. We cannot drive an intersection analysis with the kind of data and statistics we collect as international organizations as well, or otherwise, if you look at from the perspective of what is publicly available as well. And I guess, again, if whenever the opportunity arises, asking the right questions to hold those who are responsible really for the implementation of the FIAP to account. What has worked, what is not working, where can we focus more, what needs to change in terms of course of actions or measures. I think young people's voice matters a lot, and there's a huge need to at the moment to really bolster the momentum around the feminist agenda. And currently, as we've seen, there is a lot of gaps still in achieving gender equality and pursuing the human rights agenda. So, in your personal capacity, wherever possible, I think raising your voice and asking questions to the right people would be something that I would encourage for young people.
Thank you so much, both of you.
Can I just add something? I think that last point that Zeenia made is so important. Asking the right questions and not be afraid of asking those questions, not thinking that, well, I don't know enough that I can. Some of those things are common sense. Some of you might be doing volunteer work, whether here at home or abroad, whether it's going there, those programs where you go and you build something, or you build a school, and very often they're feel-good programs. They don't always have long-lasting, sustainable results. So ask yourself those good questions and challenge the organizations that you collaborate with. Okay, are we acting as saviors when we go out and build those whatever we're doing? Are we encouraging dependency where we're doing those programs? Or are we building the exit strategy in whatever it is that we're doing so that they don't need us to come back in 5 years? So those are the questions. This is the big dream of the FIAP. Challenge the structures, the systems that maintain people in the same situation of poverty and inequality, and having to call on somebody else to drink, to eat, to go to the washroom. So those, and maybe you're not, but maybe schoolmates or people who go and come back and they're happy and proud of themselves. Yes, there is. It feels good. But there are deeper questions to reflect on, and you're very well placed to ask those questions.
Thank you so much for adding that, Carelle. That was a very important point. I'm mindful of the time, so is everybody okay to stay for until 7:05, maybe a few more minutes? Okay, great. And anybody, any of the court members, does anybody have any questions for our speakers today?
I have a question. Sorry, I didn't really. Oh, wait. I'll wait.
Yeah.
Should I go?
You can go, and then we can have Dale ask.
Okay, yeah. I should have raised my hand, my bad.
No,
I just wanted to ask, this was really, really insightful. And I just wanted to ask, what are some areas of improvement in FIAP? Like, both of you would have kind of, you really know FIAP and the implementation, and like how your organization kind of implements it and imbibes it. So have you seen anything in it that, like any ideas for improvement, something that it's not Like, is it only just like a badge for kind of Canada that in the international level that, okay, we're a feminist, but I don't know if there's any improvements that you guys would can suggest.
Zeenia is really more in the works of the implementation of it. One area that caught my eye is if there were ever a FIAP 2.0, I would like to see a very strong reference to power shift. I would like to see more specific and direct. Yes, there is empowerment. And I did a quick word search on the FIAP. I don't know, maybe I was bored. I don't know what I did that, but there is, you'll find the word local, you will find the word power, like in empowerment or just power. But there's no emphasis on shifting the power. There is that undertone of supporting, empowering, but to me, it lacks, and you know, it is a very strong policy. Really, it's a very strong policy. I think we needed to have that in 2017 to be able to talk about it and critique it today. So it is very normal. But if we ever have a 2.0 version, I would like personally to see a stronger, like a clear, intentional set of provisions on shifting power, and shifting not just resources, because power doesn't, you know, shifting money is not the end of the game. Shifting power, decision-making, authority in design, in implementation, all of that to me should be better reflected in, you know, if we have a next version.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Dale, would you like to go?
Hi, yes. Thank you so much to both of you, really, well, to all the guest speakers, for these wonderful contributions. One of the big questions that I was left with, however, is really how we tackle the critique that often comes from the right about this being an issue that's waged by special interest groups. I think that that's something that I find myself struggling in my own work, is really how do we get decision makers, especially when we're trying to do provincial work, as currently the government of Ontario is run by the Conservative Party, to take these types of issues seriously when they as a party have no interest, and when an issue this particular doesn't necessarily have a prima facie appeal to like a broader group, right? This, I don't know, to me it seems very susceptible to the special interest criticism, and I would just like to get your maybe strategies on how we can try to overcome this and make some progress on it.
Well, again, I think, Carelle, maybe you're a better place to answer this question, because I don't have an experience with, yeah.
So this is our homework at the moment. Refine our language to speak conservatives, to because you're right on. Some of the language doesn't resonate with them. It puts them off, even worse. But there are areas that no one will argue against. Education, the education agenda that was adopted in 2018 at the G7 was started. It was initiated by the Conservative. Education, I mean, who's going to say, well, we don't want children to be educated? So there are angles, and again, this is our homework, so it's work in progress. What are what is the least common denominator in the vision? The things that even if we had
I think Carelle dropped off, might be because of the internet connection. maybe we'll give her a few minutes. But
Uh-huh.
yeah, would you like to say a few words?
Yeah, Zeenia, you want? Sorry, I don't.
You can finish this thought, and then I can maybe talk about another side of this where we face this issue in implementation.
So short answer is really there are elements. Find the bridge. You know, I gave the anecdote of that cross-partisan reception, and it happened because they focus on the areas they agreed on. Education is one. But can you really talk about education without talking about the mothers? Can you talk about the children without the mothers? When you talk about education, can you talk about education only in times of peace? No, you have to talk about education in times of crisis. What about education in refugee camp? This is a topic that that resonates with the conservatives, also with the liberals. So I think it's not that you out of necessity, we have to pick and choose and start with the issues where we agree. And then you work your way up to tackle the difficult subject. If you hit them in the face with gender equality and all that, women empowerment, and all, they would say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'll see you tomorrow.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I think also just from the perspective and our experience of implementing these programs that are geared towards gender equality or have the word feminist in it, sometimes it's in certain contexts it's a huge taboo. It's not easy to go in with that language and start. Start sort of a discussion or even get communities on board when you have such words in your language that are often taboo in certain contexts. And this is also, I mean, we have to be really careful and think also from the perspective of doing no harm. So that's when the essence or the values are taken forward, and there's a need to sort of step back and take our time to sort of work in a maybe culturally appropriate context and really bring communities on board with the agenda as well. That's one strategy, to pause and take our time with the social mobilization aspect around some of these terms. But it's often an issue, I think, that we face in several contexts, and it can also be really detrimental and harmful to women's rights organizations or women rights defenders in certain contexts. So there's this need to do a risk analysis and ensure that we're putting in place measures that ensure protection, especially of partners or women's rights defenders that we will be engaging in certain contexts. So those are some of the strategies that we practically do employ. And I think some feedback again to GSC on particularly the Women's Voice in Leadership program. I'm part of the community of practice. I've heard it across from, I think, all of the partners, again, is this need to focus on risk mitigation, again, for women rights defenders where there are challenging contexts. And that should be coming through maybe more funds or thinking through a risk strategy again. But it needs to, if there is a women voice in leadership second phase of the program from GSC's end, that is something that Global Affairs Canada also needs to think about as a funder, as a donor. What needs to be done to protect women human rights defenders in countries.
Thank you so much, Zeenia and Carelle, for those answers. Is there anybody else who would like to ask anything? No? Okay, well, yeah. Pragya.
Thanks, Madhuri. Thank you so much, Zeenia and Carelle. I had one question which was in regards to what you were talking about, Carelle, about the Auditor General's report on how global affairs was not able to achieve the targets, is what you said. So I just wanted to follow up because you said that we'll take some time to unpack that. So I wanted to know what was the follow-up on that? Was there a review? Did they look into it? And has there been any progress in that regards?
So the good thing is that Global Affairs immediately responded, agreeing with all the recommendations. So they did not argue against any of the points. So the audit went, so they, like their like assessment or quiz test questions, and Global Affairs agreed with everything, committing to take action. Well, it's been only a few months, so we'll see. So if your question is what has happened since then, it's too soon to tell. But it's very positive that that Global Affairs agreed on everything and committed to take action.
That's good to know. That's good progress. That's a good starting point, I would say. I had just one more question, and this I think I'm probably asking on behalf of the YPH, is that is there any way in which the YPH can associate with PLAN's work or Cooperation Canada's work going forward in the implementation of FIAP or any other way?
That's an interesting question. Well, do you have anything in particular in mind? Maybe that will be easier. Do you have any option, any avenue that we could discuss, or?
No, in terms of your programs or any of your conferences that might be coming up in terms of getting to know the voices from the youth as the group that YPH that already exists, something of those sorts, or any other avenues that they could participate in.
I'll just add to that as well. Zeenia, I know the plan does a lot of youth advocacy conferences or small like consultations. So that could be an example of something that you could talk about too.
Yeah, we definitely have a big youth community engagement program. And there are opportunities for young people to get involved as champions of change, global active citizens working on development solutions together. I think for that program, there is registrations open right now on our website. So I'd encourage members of the YPH to check that out. If you stay connected with PLAN International's youth community, we do regularly share opportunities for policy advocacy engagement on the official development assistance, also to promote global development and for humanitarian action as well. So I can't think of anything that is coming up, but definitely I think there would be updates on our website, particularly around on PLAN Canada's youth community hub. Other than that, just from a very practical standpoint, I don't know. I mean, there's not as a group, but I know there are individuals that are within the YPH. If you are looking to get involved, practically with the work that we do have a summer associates program as well. That runs every summer if you are between jobs or you're graduating or taking the summer off. I think that's a really good way to get involved with some of the work that PLAN does. We do have summer associates that come every year and get involved in different functional areas and different streams. So aside from some of the policy advocacy work, something practical would be the summer associates program.
So we don't have programs like PLAN, but maybe three things that just off the top of my head. There's no events coming up soon that I can think of. Last year, we had our annual conference, and we reached out to, we had a number of youth volunteers who, it's a good networking opportunity. It's, they get to hear discussions and meet people. So, but we are not having a conference this year. It will be in 2024. The second thing is, and again, this may appeal to some of you. One of my colleagues is leading a project that is called the Future of International Cooperation. And she will be, she's organizing in October or November. It's called, she calls it a special interest group conversation. And the one in November is with youth. So it will be a group of youth reflecting on the future of international cooperation. So Pragya, I can, we'll be in touch, and I can pass on details, and you can see who in the group will be interested. And it's just 2 hours. I think it's 90 minutes. It's a conversation, and she has, it's a workshop style. The third thing is that we technically have a youth working group at Cooperation Canada. I say technically because the group has been dormant for, for a long time. But, we had the conversation where we thought, okay, do we need to revive that? Do we need to drop the youth group altogether? Because we are not very well equipped to facilitate that. And it's not the way to do it is not for us to facilitate each working group. It's also for members to chip in. So maybe that's another thing we can discuss, Pragya, if there is interest and if there's long-term interest, because starting the working group is easy. It's sustaining it that is challenging. So, yeah, 3 avenues. So definitely the youth dialogue on the future of international cooperation. I'll pass on the information once I have it. I'll put you in touch with my colleague. That's easier. And for conference 2024 and youth working group, we can discuss.
That's awesome. I would love to touch base on that. And I'm sure everybody, all the YPH members are taking notes of what was being said and looking to get involved. Madhuri, do you have any final words before you like to pass it to me?
Yeah. Thank you. I thought this was ending at 7 and it's ending at 7:30. So this was great news. We got to talk more about all of this. So, and thank you for sharing the link, Madison, as well, about plans, youth opportunities. I guess if no one else has any questions, I just have one question. So we talked a little bit about the shift away from the global north kind of helping the global south. So what are some steps that Canada can take towards shifting away from that colonial power dynamic? I know there's focus on, just making the program sustainable so that, the women and girls or whoever is affected by these programs can continue to be on the path towards like success or well-being. But, what are some of the ways that Canada can shift away from that colonial dynamic?
I can start, Carelle. Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned this also, Carelle. You alluded to the fact that within the FIAP, there is this mention of prioritizing development assistance that really meaningfully, I'm not sure if the word meaningfully is within it, but that supports women's rights organizations. But what we're seeing more and more, and I think it's a start, but it's a learning journey, I think, for organizations that are intermediaries, GSC as well, Global Affairs Canada, and those that are overseas, is this emphasis, which very rightly so, in having your local organizations or women's rights organizations in the context abroad, in Global South in particular, more involved in design and development of international development programs. It makes most sense because these are issues that they are already leading on at a grassroots level. They are closest to those communities. They're from those communities. So, there is absolutely, for more effective programming also in that sense, this shift is absolutely necessary. And we've seen GSE as a funder also press upon this quite a lot, and rightly so. But having said that, I think one of the things that needs to practically also change with donors and funders, GSE or otherwise, is a shift in their own processes and systems to really make this change happen. Because as a donor, as a funder, that you have a certain system in place, which makes it very hard from, again, a compliance and perspective to really especially when funds are concerned, and where you want local organizations or women's rights organizations to take more responsibility and manage funds directly. I'm just giving one example of where the shift in kind of localization is, or this kind of shift in giving more shifting power, or giving more due actually power to Global South is concerned. For that, I think there's an internal kind of necessary change that needs to happen also at the donors end. So I would say, it's already starting, but it's a learning journey, and we're in it together.
Absolutely, Zeenia is absolutely right. And if I can add two things, I think there's homework at home and there's homework abroad. At home, it starts with legislation and regulation. It starts with legislation and it gets translated into regulation. 2 years ago, something pretty major happened. The federal budget included a section on the Income Tax Act. So the Income Tax Act is the piece of legislation that determines many things, including how the charitable sectors, the charities, NGOs, channel funds, not just charities, but also private donors, etc. But the focus here is charities, so organizations like we are, how we can and are allowed to transfer funds to organizations that are not charities. So organizations in other countries are not charities under Canadian law. That change, it's not a big change, but it signaled that the government is aware that the current way, the traditional way of working is not working anymore. That colonial paternalistic approach is not working. It's not working at home, it's not working abroad. So there's a lot, and if you're interested, it's a loaded topic, but I'll just put in the chat just a link, and there are links in that piece that we published a few months ago, and that can give you access to other resources. So that's domestic. We're homework on legislation, law, and regulation. So all the rules that the Canadian Revenue Agency takes, for example. But abroad, there is also a voice that Canada can take, a position that Canada can have according to the value division of the FIAP. There is here. So the 2023 OECD report on international aid speaks loudly of that, the realization of the global north, and I put the link here, realizing that the system that we have is not working. And we either change or we become irrelevant. It's a huge report, but you can, digest it little by little and see where's the trend. And Canada can use the FIAP to emphasize some of the findings in this report. So homework at home, homework abroad.
Thank you so much, both of you. That was really fantastic to hear. And thank you for all of the answers throughout this whole hour. I feel like we all learned a lot, especially coming from two people who are very experienced in the field. So thank you. Pragya, if you would like to take it away.
Of course. Thank you so much, Madhuri, and thank you for being so efficient on time and ending with a very important topic today. I just wanted to reiterate what Madhuri just said. I wanted to thank you, Carelle and Zeenia, for your insight and expertise. It's been an honor and a pleasure listening into you. And as we move on in our Policy Matters series to focus on other action areas of FIAP, today was a very important session for us to set the foundation of what we'll be learning in the upcoming sessions. So thank you once again. I'm sure I'm reflecting on it and all the participants will be too in the coming few days. I also would like to thank YPH members, Branavi, Biko, and Madhuri, and OCIC programs lead volunteers, Helena and Sagarika, for all their efforts in making this session a huge success. And with that, I would like to conclude today's session and invite every one of you to stay tuned to our upcoming sessions. The details of it are in the chat. So thank you so much for joining us today. I hope you all have a great evening and we look forward to seeing you again.